Hello, everybody. Today we have a special guest on the podcast. As the industry shifts towards more sophisticated metrics than the simple impression, attention is fast becoming the new currency, replacing more simplistic measurement metrics like viewability. Leading the charge, Lumen Research have been advocating for the adoption of attention in the industry, and today we're talking with the CEO, Mike Follett. Mike, great to have you on the podcast and welcome.
Nice to be here, Gareth. Nice to be here.
No worries, no worries. If it's okay, we'll just dive straight into the questions, which you've had in advance. If you could just tell us a bit about Lumen Research and what the company does.
Well, Lumen's about 12 years old. We started in 2013, initially as a research company. We're an eye tracking company, and we developed some software that turns the webcam on your phone or on your desktop computer. I'm now pointing to the webcam here that we're speaking through, with my finger looming into the camera there. It turns that webcam into an eye tracking camera, and that helps us understand. We can ask people to download this stuff onto their home phones or their home computers, and with their permission, we can understand what it is that people could see on their computers or on their screens, and what they do in fact look at. Because just because something is viewable doesn't mean it will get looked at. People are very good at ignoring ads, which comes as a terrible shock to people if you work in advertising, but is bloody obvious if you don't. Now, we've done research amongst hundreds of thousands of people all around the world, and we've been able to see patterns in that data. Over time, you see time and again, big ads that are on screen for a long time get much more attention than small ads that zoom straight past. Or ads in format A, even though they're tiny, actually get tons of attention, whereas ads in format B, even though they're big and bold, even though they seem like they should get lots of attention, are actually really easy to ignore, and yada, yada, yada. If you can see these patterns, you can make an algorithm, you can make a predictive model. Format A on website B for X seconds, on a Tuesday will get more attention than another alternative. And this is really, really useful, because once you've got this predictive model of attention, you can start applying that to all forms of advertising. And sort of, instead of doing more and more eye tracking, you can just estimate. You can sort of guess, using that algorithm, how much attention ad number 1 has got, or ad number 2, or ad number 3. And so we've done all of this eye tracking work to build this predictive model of attention that predicts attention based on viewability characteristics.
Amazing.
So once you've got that model, what do you do with it? Well, the first thing is that you can apply it to historic data. You can say, last year or last week or yesterday, I bought all of these ads and it got this much viewability. How much attention did I get in reality? Or I paid this much on website A and I paid that website B a different amount, but I got the same amount of attention on each. Which is the better bargain? Or where's the cherry and where's the lemon when it comes to media buying? Now that's one thing, but that's great. We do that quite a lot using this as a sort of post-bid measurement solution to help you work out where the bargains are and so on. But also you can use it pre-bid. If you always know that ads on website A get tons more attention than website B, or if you always know that format A on Facebook does better than format B, then you don't have to wait for us to tell you that you've been wasting money. You can stop spending money on the bad stuff and start spending money on the good stuff, or on the good websites, or on the good content, or whatever it is. And so we can use this predictive model not just to predict the past, but also to predict the future. And so we embed these algorithms as pre-bid contextual targeting tools. You guys at Audience Store obviously are all about audience, different people looking in, and that's a big thing. We, on the other hand, are a contextual targeting solution, finding the best websites and the best formats for you to go and buy in real time. So all of that effort, all of the eye tracking, all the modeling ends up with post-bid measurement or pre-bid optimization.
Amazing. Yeah, because I remember, back when viewability basically first came out in programmatic, we had Integral, Ad Science, and people like Double Verify sort of coming into the market, and it was really exciting because at the time we were optimizing towards very basic sort of um, metrics. So obviously there was impression and delivery, but then you had sort of your click, and then maybe you had some on-site behavior from Google Analytics, and then obviously we would track to sale. Within that, you have like post view, etc., etc. But it's interesting. It's interesting to see when viewability first came out. What was actually delivering, because you could have activity and sites that were actually looked like they were driving, for example, sales on, for example, a post view, but then that ad hadn't actually been seen, so it was just a case of the user visiting the website and converting anyway. So that sort of shed light on that side of things, and then I guess attention sort of takes it that next step further, because you could start to then obviously not just whether the ad was viewable, but you could also see if they actually paid attention to it, and then sort of does it help on the attribution journey,
Well,
attention?
absolutely. I mean, well, the first thing to say that this word viewability is a very clever. It sounds like viewed, but actually it means able to be seen. It's the opportunity to see. In other media like out of home or TV, you often talk about OTS, opportunity to see. It doesn't guarantee that people will look at it because, like I said, people are really good at ignoring stuff. And viewability is the same. The ad was a bit, you were able to see it, doesn't mean that people actually look at it. So we measure that delta, I suppose, between things that could be seen and what is actually seen. And what we find is that viewability is a pretty good start. I tell you one thing: no one can ever look at an ad that was never on screen. There isn't anything that's so invisible as an ad that doesn't reach the screen. So viewability is a very good first step. But when you add on the additional predictions that you get from Lumen, you can understand not just what could be seen, but what was probably actually looked at and for how long. And when you look at that, you can see that there is not a bad relationship between viewability and sales, but it is very noisy. There is stuff that's definitely not on the screen, definitely doesn't work, and stuff that is on screen has a better chance of working. But the relationship between viewability and especially viewable time and clicks and conversions to sales is okay, but not brilliant. But when you add on the Lumen data to convert viewability data into this attention prediction, then we see that there's a much stronger connection between the impressions you buy and the impression you make at the other end, the memories or the money that result from advertising. So a few years ago, we did a big audit with PwC, the media auditors, and they found that viewability data was quite good at predicting sales, but Lumen's attention data was very good at predicting sales. And that gap between quite good and very good, that's the value of Lumen.
Very good, very good. So obviously we have that, and then obviously you guys are involved post bid, so you're sort of helping people measure their activity, and you'll then feed back in terms of the actual attention that was paid to that campaign, and then you can sort of take that into pre-bid, so helping companies like us, I guess, actually make sure that we're bidding on the correct impression based on what we think is going to provide the best attention. But what are the sort of other key features that make Lumen stand out versus competitors in the space?
I think one that's very important is just the size of our data set and the the confidence you can have in the data. It's really important, if you're going to be predicting attention, to have some attention data upon which to base your predictions. So companies like Lumen, and there's a company out there called Amplified as well, you may have heard of. We actually go to the trouble of collecting a lot of our attention data and then using that to build really robust measures. There are other attention companies out there that don't go to the trouble of actually collecting any eye tracking data. So one of our big competitors is a company called Adelaide, but they don't actually collect any attention data. So I have no idea how it is they go and make any predictions on attention. Who knows? People buy this stuff perhaps without asking questions. There's a slight sort of emperor's new clothes feeling I get from them. So that's one thing, having some data. The second thing is making sure that that data is super, super transparent. Companies like yours need data that is really, really easy to understand so you can fit it into your models, because our data is just one of the many, many, many ingredients that goes into your data. There's no point in having a black box, just some random score for all our different ads. We have to be able to explain to people like you, it's website A, in location B, in format C, and so on, that all come together so that your data scientists can make use of the data. And so that just having some data and then having transparency in the data is really, really important, which I think is really useful for being able to make sure that we're an ingredient within a richer product from the likes of Audience Store. And that, I think, is why companies like IAS and like Double Verify, who previously I think saw us as competitors, have been able to collaborate with us. We actually supply our attention predictions so that you can get Lumen attention predictions on top of IAS data or on top of Double Verify data. We can collaborate with them, and they chose us because we have the right data and because we are super transparent. So that's really cool. But then there's a third thing that I think makes this really important, which is to understand our limits. Lumen is probably the best company in the world doing what we do. We have the biggest data sets, we have the best eye tracking, we have the best modeling. But even then, we know that we're missing a whole bunch of really important factors. Things like audience data, like your data, or things like creative. Because our models are really good at saying that all things being equal, an ad on this website is going to get more attention than an ad on that website. But we know that things aren't equal. Sometimes some creative is much, much better than others. Or sometimes a brand like McDonald's doesn't need tons and tons of attention to get the job done. Perhaps it just needs to show the golden arches, or, we work with Carlsberg at the moment. And in some markets, Carlsberg is really, really famous. And so everyone just recognizes it instantly. And in other markets, Carlsberg is a sort of challenger brand, sort of establishing itself. And then it needs slightly different levels of attention. We understand that creative makes a massive, massive difference. And so we've got a whole suite of tools to help brands really understand what's the right level of attention that their brand needs to get the job done, or how can they improve their creative to get a sort of unfair share of attention.
That's really interesting. So you're feeding back into the creative process as well?
Absolutely. It's really, really important. You have a whole lot of stuff on the media. Website A really is better than website B, but that is only part of the story. The creative is super important there. And that's what you know if you have a whole load of data, point one, and you have a whole load of transparency, point two. The corollary of loads of data and loads of transparency is understanding the true value of the creative.
Amazing. And so I guess you mentioned Carlsberg there, and McDonald's. Are you potentially working with them?
We have worked with McDonald's. Our biggest clients would be people like Amazon, Boots, We do lots of work for Chevy in the States. We do lots and lots of clients all around the world. Some who like talking about what we do, others are a bit more circumspect in giving. Well, often because they know they're onto a good thing. So why tell the world where the good websites are and where the bad stuff is?
Yeah, yeah,
They're
fair enough.
benefiting from this sort of attention arbitrage at the moment.
Very good. And I suppose with that in mind, then, do you have a client result that you can share with us?
Yeah, so we've been doing quite a lot of work with auto clients recently, and a big South Asian, no, sorry, big North Asian car company working across Europe found that they were getting the viewability data that they were getting was predictive of sales and, well, certainly of test drives. Buying ads that are viewable is a good idea. But then when they started using our data, they found that their test drive rates went up by, I think, 441%.
Wow.
Over the course of versus the business as usual stuff. Now, there's two ways of taking that data. One is that this attention data is really, really valuable because you can't remember or act on an ad you don't look at, and there's there's a lot of ads that are viewable that don't get looked at. Another way of thinking about it is, what the bloody hell were they buying beforehand? If we could improve it by 4.5 times. So I put it down on the agency was doing a good job beforehand, and Lumen helped them do an even better job. That's the spin that I'd like to give on that one.
Definitely, yeah. I think agencies can only do as well as the information that they have, I suppose, right? It may be that the metrics that they were working off, obviously they're optimizing towards those.
Yeah,
The campaigns look good. I mean, and then you get this new sort of layer of intelligence that you can actually use to optimize even better. Um,
yeah. I think that's a really important point about like what is it that you're optimizing to, and it's certainly known in the case of this Asian car brand working in Europe, that the challenge that they're given the agency was that the price mechanism for programmatic must be working well. There's so many factors that go into how you price a commodity like advertising. Let's just assume that the market is efficient, and therefore let's go for the cheapest possible media. And the price will reflect the quality of the media. But what we found is that by aiming for the cheapest media, you weren't necessarily getting the most cost-effective media, because there ain't anything as expensive as an ad that no one looks at. That really is a waste of money. And I think that the programmatic ad market is very poorly priced. It doesn't respond well to the price mechanism. And there's an awful lot of good stuff out there that is underpriced, and there's a whole lot of expensive stuff that doesn't really warrant the price that it's getting. So what we help them do is by helping them optimize to attention rather than to price, in some cases we actually increased the CPM that they were paying. Disaster. Suddenly, media was getting more expensive, but effectively, it was getting much cheaper because they were only buying stuff that was actually good, and they were cutting out a whole load of stuff that looked cheap, but wasn't cheap. It was worthless. So our data can really help with the sort of economics of advertising by helping what you might call true price discovery.
Definitely, yeah, no, that's very interesting. It's very interesting how, like you say, that different ad units can be sort of mispriced still, even when programmatic's this mature, and we've been doing this as long as we have. That there's still certain assets that are underpriced, and certain basically misallocation of advertiser resource. And I guess as
Exactly that.
people like you come in the market, you sort of help even that out and direct advertiser budget to the best performing media.
Exactly, and I think that the outcomes measures that we've got as an industry aren't particularly brilliant, and they're not very good at distinguishing things. So there's the big platforms will mark their own homework and say you spent loads of money here, and hey presto, it turns out you've made loads of money. But if you pity the poor brand manager there, who when you add up all the sales that platform A, platform B, platform C have claimed to have generated, is actually far more sales than they actually made. How the hell does that work? And that's because they're all doing their own little thing in isolation. So you can't really use that type of data constructively there. Similarly, on the programmatic side, it's quite hard to link the exact through line between each and every ad that's served and a sale at the other end. Again, largely because we use this weird attribution modeling from Google, which again seems to serve be at the service of Google rather than the brand. So that means that the pricing mechanism for most digital media, be it on the platforms or programmatic, is incomplete. And like you say, we've been doing this as an industry for years, but we've never been able to join all the dots. Now, attention data isn't the full picture, but it helps you in that dot joining process to work out where the good stuff is and how to avoid the bad stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's another step on the road, isn't it? Rather than the Holy Grail. But obviously, I think the Holy Grail, like you say, it's very interesting because it's interesting how brands have allowed the big platforms to sort of, like you say, mark their own homework. That a lot of the attribution modeling and things that are done by the very media owners. It's kind of like, so for example, like ITV. Doing their own econometrics modeling. Obviously they do, but generally that is given to a third party like their agency or another third party to actually do. So it's very interesting how in the digital space and specifically programmatic that we've allowed the big platforms to effectively, like you say, mark their own homework, which again what we found is they do tend to overstate the efficacy of their own media, unsurprisingly, or they'll give you options, for example, on the attribution modeling where, for example, especially, historically working across channels like paid search and things like that, obviously the Google attribution models would upweight, the paid search element of it, because obviously, and brand search and things like that, because obviously that makes them look better. So unsurprisingly, right?
Well, I suppose so, and I am not a good enough statistician to say why that's the case. But you have to remember that these models and these attribution models are built by humans, humans with incomplete data, and I'm sure the maths is sound. I don't think anyone is perpetrating a fraud on their clients. It's just that it's incomplete. And those Facebook ads, which might be performing extremely well, also exist in a world where there are TV ads for the same brand, or there's price differences, price offers, or there's a whole range of additional factors happening simultaneously that the model doesn't know about.
Yeah, that they can't factor in. Yeah,
Exactly. So I
and
think
so that last touch attribution, very much sort of favors channels like paid search and remarketing, for example, which obviously are big, for example, like Google products. But like you say, it's very hard. It's very hard for them to incorporate the TV data or the offline, the press, the radio, and things like that. So,
and that's where I see the attention data that we provide as being sort of quite helpful there. We've recently been doing an awful lot. Our data gets used an awful lot in econometric models, and we have a big partnership with Ubiquity, who are probably the leaders in the field, and the sort of often people like Mark Ritson would say are the sort of arbiters of whether or not advertising works or not. And some of the research that we've been doing with them shows a pretty much one-to-one connection between how much attention different media generate and how much incremental profit is generated by 1,000 impressions in that media. We've got data on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and all of those great places, but also on TV and cinema and radio. And when you line up the profitability numbers next to the attention numbers, you see an astonishing connection. Last time we looked, the R squared, the relationship between incremental attention and incremental profit, was 0.979. So, a pretty one-to-one connection there. Now, this is important because it sort of suggests that in the hubbub of all of these different metrics and all these different people, saying, I generated this many sales and I generated that many sales, you could perhaps use the attention data as a sort of rule of thumb. If platform A is saying that they've generated 20% of your sales, but they've only actually contributed 10% of your attention to that entire campaign, then perhaps we can be a bit suspicious of that. If, on the other hand, platform B is saying, well, we generated, 7% of your overall sales, but when you look at the numbers, it suggests that actually they're probably contributing 15% of the attention. Perhaps, ladies and gentlemen, we have our first instance of a platform underestimating how much they're contributing to the profits. So it's quite cool once you've established this relationship between attention and outcomes, or attention and profit, to use it as a rule of thumb, as like a heuristic, to go and look at all of your attribution models and go, hang on, does this smell fishy, or does this smell right?
Very interesting, very interesting. And obviously, there's a lot of publicity around AI at the moment with the advent of LLMs in the last couple of years, really. And I understand that underneath your technology here, there is some element of artificial intelligence. So how do you think AI more broadly is going to change the ad tech industry over the next few years?
Well, there's a lot of AI in what Lumen does, and we use it in 2 or 3 different ways. The first way is to collect the base eye tracking data, requires a very sophisticated form of computer vision, a computer vision about human vision. And that's involving, so that the very, very hardcore maths to be able to do some eye tracking data at the collection at all. And so that we do lots of AI there. And then once you've got the base data, you have to build these really complex predictive models, and those learn over time. And so there's an awful lot of AI put into that. So I think we're a tech company that actually has some tech, and an AI company that's actually built some of our own AI. So we know whereof we speak. I reckon, though, that this is, that's as an input. The really exciting thing is the output of AI. And I see it happening in 2 or 3 ways. One is in helping us not just predict whether people are going to be looking at boxes on a screen, whether they're going to look at an ad on platform A or an ad on publisher B or something like that, but also help people predict how much the creative will make a difference in drawing attention. I was saying beforehand that we can predict the media, but we then have to do additional tests to predict the creative. Well, if you collect enough data, you might be able to build predictive models of attention for the creative. And I think there are some companies that are already doing that, which is really exciting, and helping, therefore, not just plan the creative, but also optimize it in real time. I think that's what we'll see from Lumen and from others. But then I think also we'll see quite a lot of AI at the planning stage for media as well. It's interesting when you go and talk to people like a lot of our data is used by the big agencies like Dentsu and Havas, and we're now the attention supplier for Choreograph, WPP's planning tool. What you see there is the application of AI as an additional lens to the planning of media at a big scale, whether you're going to advertise on Facebook or Instagram or cinema or radio, but then also in the sort of micro-targeting of things. I see big applications for AI in the sort of planning and optimization of campaigns there.
Very interesting. So, not just using, I guess it is kind of pre-bid, but is applying attention across the whole media plan.
It's what we do already, but it's done manually. So we have all of this data embedded into agency planning tools, so that planners can say, well, how much attention would a typical TV campaign get? How much attention would I get if I spent all of that money on Facebook or all of that money on programmatic and things like that?
Very good.
That happens already. The really exciting thing is when you allow AI to start playing with that and you put in some interesting constraints. You can't put all of your budget on one thing or all of your budget on another. So you're putting in some sort of reach parameters or frequency parameters, or saying, I don't know, TV is good for this job, but I also simultaneously have a different job, which perhaps out of home or Facebook is good for. And so when you've got multiple objectives at the same time, that's where AI can really come in and help with your planning and buying.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So, obviously, outside of AI, then, what other trends are you seeing in the space that clients should be aware of?
Well, the usually I'd say the death of audience targeting because of the death of the cookie and the rise of contextual targeting. With Google further delaying the deprecation of cookies, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think what's particularly interesting, though, is it's the convergence of all these types of data. For ages, we've thought ourselves as an exclusively contextual targeting tool, almost in competition with companies like you guys, who are an exclusively audience targeting people. You're the who and we're the where of things. I don't think there has to be any distinction at all between those things. I think, in actual fact, companies like Audience Store are perfectly positioned to blend both these types of data. I think we'll see an awful lot more of that. And that, again, is this sort of blending of disparate types of data and optimizing within that can be quite a little bit hard for humans to do, but is a walk in the park for an AI model. And so I see that's a big movement of all of these signals coming together. The guys at First Party Capital have this concept that they're trying to foist upon the industry of a signals aggregator, or indeed a super signals aggregator. You hear about these companies, and I think they've ordained Scope 3 as sort of the first of these SSAs, and our data is in Scope 3's models as well. But I see that's the future of the industry. I think attention is a really, really brilliant signal, but it's just one signal amongst many. And embedding our signal into the stuff that you guys can do at Audience Store is going to make our data more useful and your product much more valuable.
So it's a bringing together of disparate data to enhance media targeting and campaigns.
Yeah, absolutely. Reduce wastage, and to increase performance of all forms of media, and allowing us to take a broader view about what we mean by performance. Most advertising doesn't work immediately. Most advertising is to raise general salience of a brand, just to remind you that Coca-Cola is a thing. You never bloody click on who on earth clicks on a Coca-Cola ad, and yet Coca-Cola ads do work. Feeling a bit thirsty now, just mentioning them, to be honest. I'll go and get myself a Coke after this. So you say the words and you make the memories. What we're going to see an awful lot more of is a sort of a broadening of the horizon of what we mean by performant advertising. Not just linking everything, all these signals to a click, or all these signals to a short-term purchase on Amazon.com, but having, like I say, a broader horizon of what it means for advertising to work.
Very interesting. And in terms of you guys, then, in terms of Lumen, what's coming up in 2025 and beyond?
Well, there's always more advertising formats for us to understand. We've got a pretty good idea on all of the big ones so far, but new big ones come up all the time. We've just done a really interesting project to understand how advertising works on Uber, for instance, and I think there's a whole range of new formats and platforms coming out after almost a decade of stagnation. Suddenly, we're letting 1,000 flowers bloom with lots of different new players out there, lots of retail media networks, these supermarkets who suddenly realize that they're also an ad network. And so understanding how attention works in those environments is something. Understanding how attention works amongst different people is really important. We have ideas about that and have done bits and pieces here or there, but I think that we'll see that we've just done quite a big project to understand how attention differs between adults and kids for the guys over at Hoopla. Because the way in which the attention requirements to get a kid to remember something is very different to getting their parents to remember it. So that can be important. And then,
That's really interesting.
yeah.
So you're targeting. You could effectively target. I guess if you're targeting a different audience for a different campaign, that would actually change obviously the pre-bid element of what we're doing. So
Exactly.
if we were targeting kids or adults is an obvious one, but maybe even different audiences within the adult segment, football fans, or maybe they pay attention to websites differently. So you could
Exactly.
effectively then change your pre-bid optimization and what we're actually bidding on based on that audience.
Exactly that, and just
Very interesting.
realizing that this isn't just a static, thou shalt receive 2 seconds of attention or 3 seconds of attention. Different people look at things in different ways, and crucially, what it is that they're looking at makes a massive difference. So the creative. And adding that in as an additional factor. We're doing some really exciting work with Carlsberg on that, and many others who I can't talk about, but Carlsberg I can, about developing brand-specific models of attention based on different brands in their portfolio or different creative there. So adding extra levels of nuance there is going to be really exciting for new media, for new audiences, and for new creative.
Sounds really interesting. Yeah, I really like the segmenting by audience type in terms of how
Well,
they
you
pay
would, given
differently.
the fact you've got a load of audience data.
Yeah,
So,
because we're actually working on, for example, like a new tool of ours, which is Discover AI, and effectively that's sort of our audience planning tool, and it's something. For example, we leverage brands' first-party data to effectively describe who their audience is and what audiences do we think are going to work for them based on any first party data that they've got. We pour sort of first party data into that. But then it'd be interesting to sort of see how you could layer on the attention side of things, how if we're going to optimize towards attention, how we might bid differently, or maybe does that sort of change the audience a little bit?
could
Those would be
change
interesting things to explore.
exactly, could change the audience so that you target. You realize that in actual fact, what you want to reach is not the lovers of a brand because they're already going to buy you, but what are the attention patterns of people who don't give a monkeys?
Yeah.
Because they're the people that you want to change. That's where the incremental sales are going to come from. Or it could be that you change the creative requirements there. So no, I think it's a really interesting set of challenges there. Whenever you've answered one question, you realise that you've actually only ever asked three more. So I used to worry that perhaps we would have answered the question of attention by now, but now I realise that attention is one of those sort of core characteristics of humanity. And it's as pretty and changeable and diverse as humanity itself. So I think we've got a few more questions to answer yet.
I imagine there's many layers to get through. Very good, very good. So yeah, we just like to round up with a few quick fire questions. In terms of your favorite brand in the ad tech space, apart from obviously Lumen and us.
Your good selves are high on the list, Gareth. But there are loads of wonderful companies out there. But I'm particularly enamoured of a company called Goodloop, um, who are a sort of an ethical advertising platform. They help brands. They're formats. They're a format owner, but they're also an audience targeting and a carbon cost sort of calculating company that allow you to work out where the good stuff is in terms of attention and in terms of, we work with them to, but where the good stuff is for business, but also where the good stuff is for the planet. And they help you sort of understand the sort of the carbon cost of attention. I think that this idea of the good stuff, both commercially and also morally, is brilliant, because we all want to do well by doing good, and that's what Goodloop is particularly good at.
Very good, very good. Yeah, and an individual in the space you'd like to give a shout out to, and why?
Well, within that, Amy Williams, the founder of Goodloop, is a real inspiration to me. She's founded this. Well, she's a female founder, which is sadly a rare thing in this world. She's recently moved to America, where she's led the growth of the company with her, but also had a baby, which is pretty an achievement anyway, but especially an achievement in the States. And I think that she leads her team with an awful lot of success, but also she lives by her own values, and I really respect that. So my vote would go for Amy Williams.
Shout out for Amy there. And what's the number one lesson learned in your career?
Crikey. Well, I think one of the things that I found is that we started Lumen 12 years ago, and we basically have had the same vision of what we wanted to do for 12 years. And so it's really, really important to have a vision and to basically stick with it. But how you achieve your vision can change quite a lot. And so being inflexible about the vision, but flexible about how you achieve the vision, I think is really important. And I think that perhaps other people aren't as lucky. Perhaps we struck gold 12 years ago with this attention economy idea. It's right. And so I think we're right to stick with it. And perhaps other people less good at choosing their visions, and so should change it. But I think most entrepreneurs in this space, and we all want to be an entrepreneur nowadays, don't we? Have an idea, stick with it, but also be prepared to be flexible about how you achieve it, because the vision may be pure, but the ways of achieving it are extremely messy.
Yeah, and I guess the market's constantly evolving around you as well. New opportunities are sort of coming up in ways that you could actually achieve that vision. And yeah, maybe doors are also closing, and it's not wise to carry on down that path. So you've got to be adaptable to actually achieve it, right?
Exactly.
Very good, very good. Well, Mike, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Not at all. Thank you for having me.